Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So in this tutorial, I'm going to be making a two-tiered under the sea themed cake. I love this theme because it's a perfect excuse to combine lots of different techniques from buttercream to decoration. So I'm going to be repeating some techniques that I've done in other tutorials, but this time on a two-tier cake. So to start, what I've got here are two cakes, one 6-inch and one 4-inch cake, both crumb coated and chilled. And what I've also got is a batch of my Swiss meringue buttercream, and I've colored a little bit blue because I'm going to be doing an ombre effect with the buttercream. So if you've watched my ombre tutorial, you'll know the technique, and if not, then you're gonna learn something new. So it's best to start with your darkest color, and I'm gonna go from dark blue to white. So I've colored my buttercream a really nice shade of blue. Just gonna give it a quick mix before filling my piping bag to make the buttercream as smooth as possible. And I've got some white buttercream spare at hand because I'm gonna be adding that in a little bit. So to fill my piping bag, I'm gonna use a tall cup because it's so much easier. Open the top and place the piping bag right in the cup. And now I'm just going to fill the piping bag with the buttercream. Doesn't matter that there's still blue left in the bowl because I'm gonna reuse the bowl in a bit. I can lift the piping bag straight out, cut off the end, and now it's ready to go on the cake. So what I'm actually going to be doing, because I want the same ombre effect on both of these tiers, I'm going to be doing this at the same time. So I'm going to keep switching between the 6-inch and the 4-inch, but I'm going to start off with the 6-inch. So using my piping bag and turntable to help me, I'm going to go straight on with a nice thick layer of buttercream around the bottom of the cake. Keeping the pressure the same to make sure that tube of buttercream is nice and even. Then I'll go on with a second one. So I'm not actually moving my hand that's holding the piping bag. I'm keeping that still and turning the turntable. Nice. Now switch cakes. And I'll do the exact same thing on the 4-inch cake. 2 stripes of this buttercream around the base of the cake. And now I want this blue a lighter shade. So I'm gonna move this out the way, put the remaining blue back into this bowl, and I can reuse this piping bag. That's why I love this ombre technique so much. So I'm already gonna put it back in the cup, ready to fill again. And then what I'm gonna do now is add some white buttercream to this blue to make it one shade lighter. Mix it through. So it doesn't actually change so much the first time you add white, but there is a gradual change, and that's exactly what we want when we're doing ombre. So now I can fill the bag again with this lighter shade of blue. And then do the exact same thing, only now going on top of what I've already piped. So again, 2 lines of this blue buttercream around the side of the cake. And I'm just being careful that there's not so many gaps in between these lines as well. Same again on the 4-inch, 2 more rows. And then all of this spare blue buttercream back in the bowl. And now I'm going to repeat the exact same thing again. So add more white, pipe on more stripes until I get to nearly the top, because I want the rest of the top of this cake white. So I've worked up the sides of the cake. I ended up doing about 5 shades of blue. It will vary depending on how tall your cake is, but I like keeping about 1/4 of the remaining cake for the white, because when I start blending, the blue generally dominates it, so I want enough white on there. So I've put the white buttercream in my piping bag, and I'm gonna go on with more stripes to make sure that that buttercream on the outside is the same thickness. All the way to the top now, and I'm gonna put on the very top. And again on the 4-inch cake, all the way to the top, and fill the very top of the cake as well. So now it's time to achieve that proper ombre blend. So if I go on straight away with my scraper, I'm going to start getting stripes, and I want that blend. So I'm going to use the back of my palette knife to blend the colors together. So starting from the bottom and really rubbing those shades of blue together. I like to do it in a circular motion. And I don't want to be taking off any buttercream here, just blending those lines together. So it looks like I'm completely ruining the cake, but this is how you achieve the ombre effect. And I always find the more blended, the better the ombre. So don't be afraid to over blend here. And now into the white. You can start to see when the blue blends into the white, it really overpowers the white, which is why I left quite a lot of space for the white buttercream. So before I start smoothing out the sides, I'm just gonna go on top with my palette knife to get that nice, flat, straight surface. So rotating the cake and using the shape of the palette knife to achieve a flat top. And now I can start scraping and revealing the ombre, hopefully. So I'm not gonna move my scraper, I'm just gonna rotate the turntable and let the sides smooth out completely. From what I can see, it's working really well. So if you do get more stripes than a blend, you can stop scraping and go back on with your palette knife and re-blend some of the colors together like I'm doing here. I've even got some white at the bottom, but I'm okay with that. Adds to the effect. Now, if you do need to patch anything up, use what's on your scraper because you've got the exact shades that you need. So I need a bit from the middle section just to fill those areas and a little bit down here as well. So I'm just finishing off the outside by going over with my scraper like I usually would, getting rid of those last few air bubbles. But as always, if there is an air bubble that you can't cover, we could do that with the decoration. Nice. I'm actually gonna leave this raw edge on the top. I think it like mirrors the waves of the sea. So obviously if you're making this and you wanna clean them off, then you know how to do it. So I'm actually going to place this in the freezer because this is going on top of the 6-inch. So I'm gonna place this in for about 5 minutes while I get on with the 6-inch ombre. So just like the 4-inch, I'm gonna start by blending that buttercream together with the back of my palette knife and work my way up the cake. Start introducing the white, get that nice and blended, and then flatten out the top before I start on the sides, using my palette knife. So it's important to get this top as flat as you can because the 4-inch cake is going to sit on top of it and we don't want it wonky. Nice and flat, now around the sides with my scraper, blending all of those beautiful shades together. And it's always much easier to do it on a 6-inch cake. The 4-inch is a little bit fiddly. So it's a little bit stripy, so I'm just gonna go around again and blend those shades together with the back of my palette knife and then smooth. So obviously I did both the 4-inch and the 6-inch at the same time. If you're in a very hot or cold environment, I recommend doing them separately. Just obviously you wanna keep the same shade that you started with. So it's the same on both tiers. So the ombre on this tier works really nicely. I'm really happy with that. And once again, I've left the edges untouched to mirror the waves of the sea. So I'm gonna place this cake in the fridge for 5 minutes, just while I prepare the other decorations, and then I'll stack it. It's always easier to stack a cake when it's cold. So into the fridge, and then we'll move on to some fun decorations. So the first decoration that I want to show you is to make little shells. Now I've got these silicone molds, which I got online, and usually they're used for fondant, but if you know me, I don't like using fondant on my cakes, and I've tried them out with buttercream and they actually work really well. So I've got some leftover white buttercream in a piping bag, and I'm simply going to fill the mold, and I'm going to try and compact the buttercream as much as possible. So just individually fill each shell shape, and then with my palette knife I can just push it down even more and clean off the excess. Just do the other mold because I want as many shells as possible, and also some can break, so you want some backups. There's something so satisfying about doing that. And then I'm going to put these in the freezer for at least 10 minutes. To be honest, the longer the better, so even 15-20 minutes is great, and then pop them out onto a plate. So because we're doing an under the sea theme, I thought it's a perfect excuse to do my Isomalt coral. So I have a full Isomalt tutorial on my channel, but just to go over it again, I've prepared 4 small bowls of crushed ice, and I'm preparing my Isomalt. Once it's a nice translucent liquid, I can go in with a drop of color. So I haven't actually mixed the colors through fully because I think it's going to add to the effect of the coral. I've done 1 drop of yellow and 1 drop of pink, and now I can start pouring. So directly onto the ice. Leave those to set, and then I'm going to go in with a little bit of titanium dioxide to make some of the coral a little bit more opaque. So and the great thing with this technique is that it's instant because it's the hot Isomalt on the cold ice, which means I can go ahead and take it out straight away because it's hardened. So I love it because I don't have a clue what it's going to look like. But after getting some of the ice out, oh, it looks amazing. Even the small bits are great as well. Wow, and that piece really looks like some coral. Now some of the more opaque shapes. I love it. So I've just set the coral to the side to dry off. The shells are still in the freezer. I'm going to take them out last minute, and now I'm going to stack the cake because the 4-inch is nice and cold. So before I do anything, I need to place some straws into the 6-inch because the 4-inch is going to sit on it, and it's also on its own cake board, and I don't want any weight going onto this 6-inch cake. So I only need 2 because it's only a 4-inch cake, and I'm going to place the straws straight into the cake all the way down, and then trim them to size. And then I'm going to place a small amount of buttercream just on the surface so the cake can stick to it. And now I need to get this 4-inch cake off. I'm going to slide my palette knife underneath and carefully lift it up. Now it's cold so I can touch it with my hands. And place it straight on top of the cake. And make sure it's centered and of course straight. That's always the scary bit, but it's nice and straight and it's on there, so I'm happy. Now I'm just gonna fill in the seam where the 2 tiers meet. I don't want it to be too perfect because I'm gonna cover it up with decoration anyway, but I've got some plain white buttercream and it also just helps secure the cake to the 2nd tier. So I can pipe around the very bottom of that top tier and then using one of these mini scrapers to scrape away the excess. Okay, now it's the fun part to decorate. So before I put on any of the decorations, what I've got here are some crushed biscuits, and this is gonna mimic sand. So I'm going to put it around the bottom where the 2 tiers meet, and then the very bottom of the 6-inch. And all I'm gonna do is just sprinkle the biscuits and try and get them on the side of the cake as well as the surface of the one below. And then around the very bottom. So this is great to hide the very bottom of the cake too, in case you had a little gap or an air bubble or anything. And then using the back of my palette knife, I can push it up onto the cake and almost stick it to the buttercream. But I also don't mind if some of it falls onto the cake board. It just adds to the effect. I like going around the bottom of the cake with something, whether it's pipe decoration, sprinkles, or in this case, crushed biscuits. I think it actually neatens up the bottom of the cake quite nicely. And again on the 2nd tier. So what I've got here are 2 shades of green, each with a slightly different leaf tip. And I'm gonna use this to draw on strands of seaweed all over the surface of the cake. And these are leaf tips, but rather than doing individual leaves, I'm gonna continue to get the seaweed effect. So start at the bottom and continue pressing to almost get a ruffled shape and release. And with the darker green, similar sort of thing, but it is a slightly different tip. So I squeeze each time as I climb up the cake. And I love the contrast of the 2 greens. Just gives it some depth. There, I think that's enough seaweed. I could continue all day. I love doing those piping, but I think that's enough. And what I'm gonna do now is put on the coral because that's the bigger decoration, and then I'm gonna fill in between with the smaller decorations. So firstly, I'm looking at this large piece here because I think that'll be an amazing topper of the cake. The coral can just sit directly into the buttercream. It's hard enough to push slightly into the cake, but you can always secure it with more buttercream if you need. And then I think a couple of pieces of the more translucent coral around it. Love it. And now I can fill in other places with the smaller pieces of coral, and they can just stick directly onto the seaweed. I don't actually know if coral and seaweed go together in the sea, but it looks cool on the cake, so I don't mind. So now it's time to unmold the shells that I had in the freezer. So I have made some earlier that have also been kept in the freezer, and the idea is to unmold them and put them straight on the cake, which is what I'm gonna do now. So sometimes they break, so I have to be careful, but if I carefully just release the mold and push it upwards, out comes the shell, and I can put it directly onto the cake. But what you can also do is unmold them, and if you don't want to use them straight away, just place them on the plate. Oh, that one broke. A couple of them tend to break, but I think I've got plenty. To be honest, shells break naturally, so if they're not perfect, that's fine. And onto the cake they go. Oh, it's looking so good. It's packing out really nicely. And just the final detail, I'm going to pipe on some bubbles because we are under the sea after all. So I've got some blue buttercream that was left over from the ombre with a plain round piping tip, and I'm gonna pipe on small circles. Just a few around the cake. And a tiny little amount of white buttercream just to make them more bubble-like. All right, to finish, of course, some glitter, because it's a magical under the sea scenery, isn't it? Of course there's glitter under the sea. And there we have a gorgeous under the sea theme. We've got ombre buttercream, piped seaweed, piped bubbles, isomalt coral, buttercream shells, the lot. It's such a fun cake to make. Try it out, and if you do, don't forget to tag me at George's Cakes. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and like this video, and please comment below on any other cake tutorials that you want to see in the future. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you very soon.